The arena is behind them, but the feeling stays. Not the music, the machinery. Trucks rolling out in disciplined lines, crew radios fading into highway static, badges and wristbands tucked away like they never even mattered. From the outside, it's ordinary, a tour moving on. From the inside, it's a system that just proved it can make people disappear without leaving a story behind. 11 women in 5 months, different cities, same vanishings. Episode 2 begins where applause can't cover anything anymore, on the road, in the quiet, in the long stretches where you have time to realize how deliberate this has been. The task force doesn't want a chase. They want an ending. And endings live where the movement stops.
The investigation moves past reviewing what happened and turns toward where it leads. This is no longer about timelines and talking points. It's about closing distance. The manager and the security guard are still under scrutiny, but they may only be pieces of something much larger. Operations like this have an anchor point. Someone waits at the end of the chain. Someone controls the space where people stop being missing and start being accounted for in ways no one sees. The task force works quietly now. Fewer briefings, tighter circles, conversations held face to face instead of over open lines. Because when a network senses pressure, it adapts, it reroutes, it protects its core. Episode 2 is about containment, about tracing movements until it narrows, from highways to side roads, from side roads to a set of coordinates, and from coordinates to a single gate that's still standing closed.
South of the border, outside Guadalajara, Mexico, a property sits behind walls that don't look criminal. They look expensive, manicured, private. The kind of place people assume is safe because it's orderly. That's the disguise, stability. The task force's working theory is simple and brutal. Backstage access creates opportunity. And opportunity is moved. Not randomly, not emotionally, but methodically, like a routine that's been tested and refined. If episode 1 exposed the corridor, episode 2 follows the corridor's output to the receiving end.
The object is not to prove that a monster exists. It's to prevent the next transfer. That means identifying the hierarchy. Who decides, who executes, who receives, and who profits. The manager can open doors, and the guard can steer bodies, but neither of them can explain where the women go once the tour moves on. Guadalajara brings a new threat: jurisdiction, distance, and the possibility of a larger network that can absorb the pressure.
The convoy rolls south like it's been rehearsed. Trucks merge, separate, regroup. Movements that look accidental to anyone not paying attention. But the task force reads it differently, as confidence. Confidence is what you get when you've run the same play and it keeps working. They keep their distance, not because they're unsure, but because they're learning what the system assumes no one will notice, where it pauses, where it accelerates, where it becomes most vulnerable. The highway turns into a corridor of its own, public, indifferent, and perfect for hiding intent. This is the first lesson of episode 2. The pipeline doesn't need secrecy. It needs normalcy.
The task force keeps its profile low. They don't want the convoy to feel pressure. They want it to keep behaving like itself. Because behavior reveals hierarchy. The manager's decisions, the guard's positioning, the tour's small adjustments, those are all signals. They watch for any hint that the receiving end is giving direction. The strategy is simple. Let the machine run long enough to show its wiring. Then cut the power in one decisive move. Episode 2 is not a sprint. It's the tightening of a net that can't be seen until it closes.
Distance changes the case. In the city, everything is crowded and loud, and disappearances can be blamed on chaos. On the open road, the silence forces patterns to stand out. Stops become choices. Detours become decisions. The team watches the convoy pass exits that would make sense and take ones that don't. No dramatic wrong turns. Small, plausible adjustments. That plausibility is the trick. It makes every move defensible, every record ordinary, every timeline boring. The task force doesn't argue about motives in this phase. They focus on leverage, the point where an ordinary choice becomes the only choice left.
They begin tracing lines of accountability instead of circling individual names. When a problem surfaces, who receives the first call? Who authorizes the next step? Who reassures everyone that nothing is wrong? Those answers shift attention away from the stage and toward the framework behind it. The quiet figures who manage doors, routes, and permissions without drawing notice. The task force understands timing is everything. Move on one side without securing the other, and the operation reshapes itself. So they stop treating it as separate incidents in separate places. It's one mechanism operating across borders. And the decision becomes clear, both strategic and moral. You move only when you can close both ends at the same time.
A call comes in that isn't spoken about out loud. A short check-in. A quiet confirmation. The manager's voice stays calm, almost bored. And that's what bothers the investigators. People doing bad things usually carry tension. People running systems carry routine. The call ends and the convoy continues. No alarm, no urgency, just sequence. In a world of human trafficking, sequence is everything. It means the person on the line isn't improvising. They're maintaining. The task force marks the moment, not because it's evidence of guilt, but because it's evidence of hierarchy.
Quiet calls matter because they're not emotional. They're transactional. That's where systems live. The task force listens for language that signals control. They also watch for the absence of language, like no questions, or no uncertainty, or no negotiation. That absence suggests that roles are fixed and that punishment is implicit. The system doesn't argue because it doesn't need to. The investigators begin to see the pipeline as disciplined labor. And disciplined labor can be interrupted if you know the schedule.
At the next venue, the manager looks like what he's always been. The person who makes problems disappear before anyone notices. That's the danger. He smiles at staff, nods at security, moves through restricted doors like he owns the air. Nothing about him reads criminal. It reads competent. Investigators watch him choose where to stand during the loudest moments, where sight lines collapse, where attention concentrates on the stage. He's not hunting, he's positioning. Positioning is quieter than hunting, and it lasts longer. If this is a machine, he's the hand on the lever, never the engine, always the control.
A good manager is invisible when things go well. That's why he's dangerous. He can redirect people without anyone remembering who did it. He can make access feel like permission rather than manipulation. The task force doesn't need him to panic. They need him to slip. Just once. A delay. A glance. A moment where he waits for instruction. Those are the tells of hierarchy. They watch him like a metronome, looking for the beat where he stops keeping time and starts taking it.
They stop focusing on individual names and start tracing accountability. When something shifts inside the system, who is notified first? Who authorizes the response? Who reassures everyone that operations remain normal? Those answers pull the investigation away from the visible faces and toward the structure underneath. The coordinators, the gatekeepers, the ones who control movement without ever stepping into view. Attention shifts to timing, to rhythm, to how decisions flow from one layer to another. Because networks like this don't collapse from pressure alone. They adjust. They reroute. They protect what matters most. So the task force treats the operation as a single mechanism stretched across distance, not separate events scattered on a map. Every action must be measured against reaction. Every step forward must account for what might shift in response. The conclusion becomes unavoidable. Intervention only works if both ends are secured at once. The source and the destination, leaving no space for the system to reshape itself and disappear.
Security is supposed to prevent threats. Here, it becomes a tool to create them. The guard's power is not force, it's legitimacy. People obey him because they've been trained to trust uniforms and authority. That trust is the pipeline's most efficient weapon. The task force plans to neutralize it by removing the surprise. Secure the perimeter, control the exits, prevent dispersal. They assume the guard will try to turn chaos into cover, so they plan to deny chaos. The operation's goal is not confrontation, it's containment, fast and clean.
Outside Guadalajara, the compound looks like an answer to every question the tour can't solve. Permanence, privacy, control. It doesn't scream criminal. It whispers exclusive. The property is maintained, predictable, almost soothing from a distance. And that's the point. People assume order equals safety. The woman who owns it understands that assumption and builds on it. She doesn't need violence at the gate. She needs the world to look away. The task force studies the walls and feels something new. Not suspicion, but certainty that someone planned for this place to absorb attention and survive it.
The destination operates with the discipline of a business. Quiet, controlled, efficient. That pattern tells investigators that they're not facing chaos. They're facing a system designed to move people the way supply chains move cargo. And systems like that respond to risk by changing routes and tightening control. So, the task force reduces chatter and positions resources quietly, building capability without signaling intent. The person behind the operation relies on distance to stay protected, and the only way to neutralize that advantage is coordination, precise enough to erase the distance in a single night.
The gate doesn't open often. That's what makes it meaningful when it does. Short windows, clean entries, no lingering. The task force watches one opening and feels a time pressure spike. Not because they want to rush, but because windows are where systems reveal themselves. A system that fears exposure opens quickly and closes faster. A system that feels safe opens casually. This gate opens like it's practiced. Smooth, efficient, indifferent. The investigators realize the compound isn't reacting to them. It's reacting to its own schedule. And schedules mean someone is in charge of time itself.
Open windows create vulnerabilities. The team marks every gate cycle, not to obsess over routine, but to predict reaction time. How long does it take to close? How fast can a vehicle move once inside? What exits are possible? They plan for denial and delay because denial and delay are the first defenses of a controlled system. The task force prepares for countermeasures, simultaneous holds, hard perimeter, immediate interior control. They're not planning to argue at the gate. They're planning to own the gate.
Back in the arena, an ordinary moment becomes unbearable. The same lights, the same screaming crowd, the same backstage access. But now investigators can't unsee the corridor. They can feel how easily someone can be guided, redirected, absorbed into the working parts of the show. Not by a dramatic invitation, but by a subtle shift. A door held, a wristband checked, a hallway that suddenly looks like the right way to go. The victims didn't have to announce anything. The environment did it for them. The task force understands why there are no witnesses. People don't witness what they assume is normal backstage movement.
The tour remains the distraction. Even now, the band performs, the crowd roars, the machine moves behind the curtain. The task force uses that distraction in reverse. While the world looks at the stage, they prepare to look behind the walls. They keep the tour moving so the receiving end stays confident. Confidence keeps routines stable. Stable routines can be seized. The plan requires patience that feels cruel because patience means waiting while people remain trapped. But impatience would create relocation, and relocation would erase the chance to rescue.
The normalcy of the tour's routine is their camouflage. Hotels, load-ins, credentials, everything looks legitimate because it is. That's what makes it such a strong cover for something illegitimate. Investigators begin interviewing staff without tipping the core theory, listening for the moments people describe as routine or part of the job. Those phrases are the blindfold. Nobody remembers routine. Nobody reports normal. The system thrives in the gap between what people can prove and what people believe.
Normalcy is how the system avoids witnesses. Not because no one could see, but because no one thinks to look. The task force trains its own eyes differently now. They treat routine like a clue and nothing usual like a warning. They position assets where nothing usual happens. Service corridors, staff entrances, parking gates. They know the system will attempt its final defense when threatened, blending into normal life. So the operation is designed to remove that blending option by controlling the perimeter before the interior can react.
A phone pings barely. No message, no call. Just a transient signal that proves a device still exists somewhere it shouldn't. The room goes still. Not hopeful, careful. Signals are dangerous because they can trigger response from the wrong side. The task force treats it like a heartbeat on a monitor. Proof of life. Proof of location. Proof that time is running out. They don't celebrate. They don't chase. They document and step back. If the system detects that pulse, it will tighten. And tightening is how people disappear permanently.
The pulse is treated like evidence, not hope. Evidence must be preserved, not chased. The task force assigns teams to monitor without provoking, to triangulate without alerting, and to prepare without pressing. Signals can trigger countermeasures. Devices destroyed, people moved, routines changed. They assume the receiving end has protocols for this. Professionals always do. So the team's response is professional too. Document, stage, synchronize. The pulse becomes a countdown they refuse to rush and refuse to ignore.
The case splits into layers. North of the border, the tour, the manager, the guard. South, the compound, the gate, the woman who receives. The task force builds a plan that treats both layers as one event. No staggered arrests, no partial moves. Because partial moves teach the system. They teach it where pressure comes from and how to reroute. The investigators speak in contingencies now. If the manager bolts, if the guard disappears, if the compound closes. They are not building a perfect operation. They are building an operation the pipeline can outmaneuver. For the first time, the system is not the only one thinking in sequences.
2 layers require 2 actions. The operation becomes a choreography of its own. Who moves first? Who holds? Who breaches? Who arrests? The task force avoids the classic mistake of cutting one wire and expecting the whole circuit to go dead. They plan to cut the source and the destination at the same time. That means timing across borders, agencies, and languages. It means silence in planning and speed in execution. The receiving end will attempt relocation the moment it senses disruption. The task force's design is to deny that moment from ever arriving.
The woman in Guadalajara doesn't need to be seen to be felt. Her control shows up as calm in places where panic would be expected. A delivery arrives and leaves without conversation. A schedule holds. A property behaves like it has nothing to hide. That's what brokers do. They turn risk into routine. They turn people into transfers. The task force doesn't romanticize her into a mythical villain. They treat her as a professional, organized, disciplined, accustomed to power. That makes her more frightening, not less. Because professionals don't stop when they get scared. They pivot.
Brokers survive by appearing ordinary. The task force doesn't look for theatrical evil. They look for control, ownership, access, patterns of authority. They build the legal and operational foundation to act quickly once the moment is chosen. Because brokers also survive by exploiting hesitation, jurisdictional debate, paperwork delays, coordination gaps. The team closes those gaps in advance. They align warrants, align entry authority, align extradition support. They intend to remove the kingpin's favorite tool, time.
Routes begin to compress. Less variation, fewer optional stops. The convoys movement becomes cleaner, as if someone decided to reduce exposure. Investigators read that as adaptation, subtle but real. The system is sensing something, even if it can't name it. This is where psychological pressure becomes tactical reality. Every adjustment the pipeline makes is also a tell. It reveals what it values. It values speed. It values privacy. It values control. The task force responds by tightening their own sequence, shortening decision loops, reducing comms, moving resources into position without announcing them. Both sides are now optimizing for the same thing, not being surprised.
Inside the task force, the focus shifts from observation to execution. Analysts finalize timelines. Legal teams secure warrants that will allow movement across jurisdictions. Tactical units begin quiet coordination with partners who will have to act at the same moment in different places. Every piece of the operation is rehearsed in theory before it ever happens in the field. Because once actions start, there will be no chance to slow down and reconsider. The people behind the pipeline believe distance and routine will keep them safe. The investigators are betting on something stronger. Preparation detailed enough that when the movement comes, the entire structure can be confronted at once instead of chased piece by piece.
Thermal imaging doesn't give faces, but it gives truth. Heat clusters where a normal household wouldn't have them. Movement pauses where freedom wouldn't. The evidence is quiet but heavy. It stops debates. It ends doubt. The task force shifts language. Not if, but when. Not maybe, but inside. They also shift posture. Empathy becomes operational. They plan for extraction, for trauma, for people who may not trust rescuers. The compound is no longer an address. It's a pressure chamber, and the team feels ethical weight of every minute they remain outside.
Thermal truth forces tactical clarity. The team stops debating whether to intervene and begins debating on how. They plan for the human reality of extraction, disorientation, fear, reluctance to trust. They prepare for medical needs and trauma response as operational necessities, not afterthoughts. Because the goal isn't a dramatic raid, it's safe recovery. The kingpin's defenses are likely procedural. Locks, routines, gate controls. The task force's counter is procedural too. Breach clean, secure fast, control movement immediately. Chaos is not a strategy, precision is.
There will not be a second clean chance. That becomes the unspoken rule in every briefing. If the compound is breached poorly, the network scatters. If the tour is hit too early, the gate closes. The task force rehearses outcomes like chess, not because they enjoy the puzzle, but because people are inside the board. They list what must happen first, what can't happen at all, what can't be allowed to drift. This is the moment where suspense becomes responsibility. They aren't chasing a story. They're guiding a window that can slam shut.
No second chance means the plan must survive resistance. The team develops contingencies for denial, delay, and diversion. They expect the receiving end to lie. They expect it to stall. They expect it to move assets. So they structure the operation around immediate control. Perimeter first, exit sealed, interior secured. They also plan communications discipline. No celebratory chatter, no premature declarations, no gaps in command. The system has survived because it is disciplined. The task force intends to beat discipline with more discipline.
Inside controlled environments, rules replace violence. The task force anticipates that. They prepare for locked doors, timed access, and compliance enforced through routine. They know that people held under systems often stop fighting because fighting never changes anything. So the plan includes small human details, blankets, translators, medics positioned close, calm voices trained for first contact. The raid is not just a breach. It's a reintroduction of choice. That's why precision matters. A chaotic rescue can feel like another assault. The team keeps repeating the same phrase in their heads. Fast, controlled, humane.
Containment systems rely on predictability. The task force plans to weaponize that. Predict the routine, then disrupt it at the exact point it depends on most. They set roles for first contact, first translation, for calm reassurance. They plan to reduce fear, not amplify it, because the people inside may interpret uniforms as another form of control. The team trains their voices, slow, clear, non-threatening, so rescue doesn't feel like capture. It's tactical empathy, and in a place built on dehumanization, empathy becomes the most disruptive force of all.
They test pressure without tipping the whole operation. A small inquiry upstream, a quiet check that shouldn't matter unless the pipeline is listening. The response is immediate in its subtlety. A shortened call, a changed meeting location, a tightened access rule. The task force gets what they need. Confirmation that the system is responsive and centralized. Centralized systems can be decapitated. Centralized systems must be dismantled piece by piece. This one reacts like a single organism. That's good news and terrible news at the same time. Good because it can be stopped. Terrible because it can move quickly when threatened.
Inside the command group, the meaning of the signal becomes clear. What looked like scattered activity now points toward a single point of authority. Analysts refine their charts, drawing lines that converge instead of spreading outward. Investigators compare timing across locations, watching how decisions ripple through the structure. Each adjustment reveals the same pattern. direction flowing from one place outward. That realization changes the strategy. Instead of chasing every movement along the chain, they begin concentrating on where the chain originates. If the structure depends on one center to keep everything aligned, removing that center won't just disrupt it, it will leave the rest of the operation without guidance. And operations without guidance rarely survive the moment they lose it.
Coordination expands. Local, federal, then international. All without making noise. That's the art. Each agency receives only what it needs to act. Each team knows its lane. The plan is built like a concert itself. Timing, cues, roles. No one needs to improvise. Psychological pressure rises because everyone understands what coordination means. It means the moment is real. It means the next phase isn't discussion, it's movement. And movement is what the victims have been denied. The task force prepares to restore it without triggering the system's last reflex, which will be to preserve itself at any cost.
Satellite imagery and thermal scans redraw the compound in the investigators' minds. A main residence facing the gate, a secondary building along the east wall, a long storage structure behind them both, metal roof still holding heat long after sunset. The infrared patterns are what matter most. One cluster near the rear building, small movements where there should be none. Another, faint but steady, along a corridor that never goes dark. The team studies the layout until it becomes instinct. Gate to courtyard, courtyard to hallways, hallways to the rooms where the heat signatures wait. Coordination now means everyone understanding the same map before anyone crosses the wall.
A staging ground forms outside the compound. Quiet vehicles, quiet equipment, quiet people. The desert night makes everything feel farther away. Like sound can't travel, like consequences can't either. That illusion is what the compound has relied on. The team checks gear, rechecks routes, rehearses entry counts. But beneath the tactical repetition, psychological tension hums. Everyone is imagining what they might find. Not gore, not drama. The worst thing, normal rooms hiding abnormal lives. They prepare themselves to treat that normality as a weapon the captor used, and to take it away.
From the ridge overlooking the property, the compound appears almost peaceful. A rectangle of light in an otherwise empty stretch of land. But through night optics, the calm dissolves into geometry. Cameras mounted near the gate, a patrol path worn into the gravel, a rear loading door where deliveries likely pass unnoticed. The team traces those features slowly, memorizing how the buildings relate to one another. They picture the route the women would have been forced to walk, from gate to interior, from interior to the rooms that the thermal imaging now marks like quiet beacons.
Perimeter work is mathematics under stress. Angles, sight lines, escape routes, response times. The task force sets a perimeter around the compound without making it feel caged. They anticipate the first reaction. Delay, denial, diversion. They plan to remove all three. In high control operations, the first conflict is not violence, it's time. Who gets to buy seconds? Who gets to hold the door closed long enough for a vehicle to move? The team decides time belongs to them now. That decision is quiet, but it changes the whole night.
The map of the compound grows more detailed with every minute of observation. The front courtyard is wide enough for vehicles to turn. A narrow side path leading toward the storage building where the heat signatures cluster. Windows placed high enough to prevent easy view from outside. Inside those walls, the infrared readings show stillness interrupted by small movements. People shifting, sitting, waiting. The investigators recognize the pattern instantly. Confinement without freedom of movement. Rooms occupied long past the hour anyone would choose to stay awake.
Night falls and the compound becomes a faint silhouette in the darkness. This is the atmosphere the kingpin trusted. Silence, distance, and routine. The task force feels a psychological shift. People talk less, breathe slower, move with more care. There is a shared understanding that the next sound will matter. Inside, the routine likely continues. Lights, doors, rules. Outside, the routine is replaced with readiness. It becomes a held note, sustained tension without release. Because release comes only when the gate yields.
Through thermal lenses, the compound never truly sleeps. The main house cools slowly, its rooms fading to a shadow. But the rear building stays alive with heat. 11 signatures, sometimes still, sometimes shifting. A guard passes once along the outer corridor, his outline bright for a moment before disappearing again. The pattern confirms what the investigators feared and hoped for at the same time. The women are still there, still inside the walls, still within reach.
5520 arrived. Squawk 530, are you code 4 for medical?
Gate discipline is its own language. The compound opens only when it chooses and closes before anyone can question. The task force studies the mechanism like it's a personality. Predictable, controlling, built to end conversations. They set positions that deny the gate its usual power. No vehicle leaves unseen. No door opens without consequence. The psychological threat of the gate is simple. It makes people feel excluded and powerless. Tonight, the team flips that feeling. They become the boundary, and the boundary is not negotiable.
From the surveillance angle, the gate reveals more than it hides. It opens inward into a gravel courtyard bordered by the main residence on the left and a covered walkway on the right. That walkway leads directly toward the structure where the thermal signatures gather. Anyone brought inside would move through that corridor first, out of sight from the road, but not far from the night optics watching now. The team memorizes the path because the path likely carries every victim across the threshold.
The last confirmation arrives. Quiet, precise, final. Presence where they expected it. Stillness where they feared movement. The task force doesn't celebrate. They exhale once, then lock back in. This is the moment where earlier restraint pays off. They didn't spook the tour. They didn't tip the receiver. They didn't trigger relocation. Now, the only remaining variable is execution. Psychological pressure peaks here because it's no longer about planning. It's about choosing to act, knowing there is no perfect outcome, only the least harmful one, and choosing to anyway.
Infrared imagery stabilizes into a clear picture of the interior pattern. 11 distinct heat signatures inside the rear building, one near the doorway. The others arranged in two adjoining rooms, separated by a wall thin enough that movement echoes through both. The investigators stare at the monitor longer than necessary, committing the arrangement to memory. Because once the gate opens, this quiet image will turn into motion.
The team holds a breath that feels too long. Radios stay low while hands stay steady. This is the last second where the system still believes in its walls. The task force imagines the victims hearing nothing, knowing nothing, waiting in the same suspended time. That empathy becomes fuel, not rage, focus. They review the sequence one final time. Breach, secure, locate, protect, and extract. No hero lines, no speeches, just the clean mechanics of rescue. The gate has not moved yet, but the night has already changed.
From the observation point, the compound looks exactly as it did hours earlier. The same lights, the same stillness, the same illusion of control. Only the people watching it have changed. They now know which building holds the captives, which corridor leads to them, which door must open first. Knowledge sits heavy in the silence.
The approach to the compound happens in silence measured by footsteps and breath. Gravel shifts under boots, slow enough not to echo against the walls. The gate stands ahead of them, taller up close than they look through surveillance. Beyond it sits the courtyard they've studied for days, the walkway, the rear building, the rooms where the infrared signatures never disappeared. Every movement now is deliberate. No one rushes. No one speaks above a whisper, because the moment they cross the threshold, the compound will stop being a place on a map and become a confrontation with the people who built it. 11 women are somewhere inside those walls. The team closes the last few meters knowing that once that gate gives way, there is no pause left between planning and reality.
A hand reaches for the latch. Another team positions along the wall, watching the windows that overlook the courtyard. Inside, nothing reacts. The lights stay steady. The hallway beyond the gate remains empty. Through night optics, the compound still looks calm, almost indifferent. But the investigators know what the cameras and thermal scans revealed hours earlier. Someone is awake inside the rear building, moving slowly between two rooms. The team waits for the final signal, eyes fixed on the gate that separates them from the interior. For a moment, the night holds perfectly still. Then, the mechanism begins to move.
The compound holds its silence for one last moment, as if nothing outside its walls has changed. Inside, routines continue. Lights on, doors closed, footsteps measured by rules no one questions anymore. The women inside have no reason to expect anything different. Outside the gate, the task force stands close enough to hear the faint sounds of movement beyond the wall. Every second stretches. Every breath is controlled. The distance that protected this place is gone now. All that remains is the barrier in front of them and the decision to cross it.
From the outside, the compound still looks intact, still controlled, still certain of itself. But the people standing at the gate now know what waits on the other side. The courtyard, the corridor, the rear building where the heat signatures never left. 11 lives held in place by routine and silence. The team doesn't move yet. They hold the moment just long enough to ensure nothing shifts inside. Then, the final signal comes, and the compound is breached.
Next time on the series finale, Episode 3 Collapse, the waiting is over. The gate opens, and the place they've only studied from a distance becomes real all at once. The courtyard, the corridor, the rooms they've mapped without ever entering, and inside, 11 women held within a system designed to keep them invisible. For the first time, that system is forced to face something it never accounted for.
And this is where it all comes together. The entry of the compound, the arrests happening miles away at the same time. No warning, no time to adjust. The people who controlled the movement are suddenly reacting instead of directing. And once that shift happens, it doesn't reverse. What's been operating quietly across cities and borders is about to be exposed all at once.